We are continuing our wildfire series, looking back at last year's record-breaking season in BC and looking at preparations for this summer. Vancouver-based author John Vaillant has spent years investigating wildfires and the reasons today's blazes are more destructive. He's the author of Fire Weather, examining the 2016 wildfires that wiped out much of Fort McMurray, Alberta. It has won the Baillie Gifford Nonfiction Prize and is currently shortlisted for the Shaughnessy Cohen Prize. And John Vaillant joins us now from Osaka, Japan. John, first off, coming off your book writing about the destruction of Fort McMurray, what went through your mind watching last year's devastating wildfires in BC?
Well, what we saw in Fort McMurray were these steadily worsening trends that were creating drier conditions, more explosive conditions for fire. And that trajectory has just continued since 2016, and 2023 was just a more developed, more nationwide example of the same trends that impacted Fort McMurray so grievously in 2016. So it's really frightening, but at the same time, if you're a climate scientist or an incident commander on wildfires, you are seeing trends that have been developing for decades now. And so it's predictable, but it's still horrible to see it in person.
Do you think British Columbians and Canadians overall, given how devastating the damage was across the country last year, do you think we've accepted how much wildfires are changing our lives now?
I think many people in British Columbia are. I think 10 years ago, most Canadians didn't know someone who'd been evacuated. And now I think everybody in Canada knows someone who's been evacuated. And many people in BC have been on standby themselves or been in the terrible smoke for days and even weeks on end. So it's a part of our reality now that it simply wasn't 10 years ago. And at the same time, most of us have a plan for our day, and it doesn't include climate change and it doesn't include wildfire. So we're in this kind of dissonant place on the one hand of knowing that there are fires out there and that they're closer to us than they have been, and at the same time we want to keep living our lives the way we used to.
Because of that, and given that dissonance, what do you think it might take for more Canadians, British Columbians, to incorporate the fact that they're going to have to deal with wildfires at some point? Maybe it's not right next to their home or their place of business, but is in their province or at least in their region.
I think people are ready to grapple with it, but I think it's going to take real leadership from mayors, from city councils, from fire chiefs to keep this topic front and center, and so that we aren't blindsided by it. And I think, given the experience of the past couple of years, really almost the past 10 years in BC, we're alive to the risk. And I think most people would prefer to deal with it proactively, but we're going to need powerful examples from our community leadership as we address that.
And you're joining us from Japan. What would you say to people who are watching this on the other side of the world and wondering about the impact of wildfires and climate change, not only in Canada, but elsewhere?
Well, I think we're feeling it globally, and we live in a really complicated system here on planet Earth. And so certain areas are experiencing much heavier precipitation than they have in the past, and other places are drying out. Certainly the weather in Asia, a huge continent, and there have been some really bad wildfires on the Chinese mainland and in the Russian Far East. Japan is a pretty rainy, wet place, I can tell you from personal experience. And fires don't seem to be a really pressing issue here. And yet they've had a history with urban fire that few other countries have. And so as you travel around the cities in Japan, there is an awareness of fire risk that is heightened compared to other nations. So it's really quite interesting, but it's not climate-driven wildfire so much as just the tendency for cities to burn grievously across history in Japan.
John Vaillant, author, joining us from Osaka, Japan. We appreciate your time and your perspective. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Good to be with you.